Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Prime Minister Modi, Your Excellency, the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. Following the tragic flash flood in Uttarakhand on Sunday, I first wish to express my sincere condolences to the government and the families and victims and people of India. Climate change is destabilizing our world, and the consequences are often terrifying, and my heart goes out to the people of Uttarakhand. We are reminded then of our global imperative to make peace with nature, and so I'm honored to join you all at the World Sustainable Development Summit. Over the years, this event has addressed the most pressing global challenges of our time, calling for collaborative partnerships across and between countries, states, and sectors to redefine our common future. We are at a uniquely challenging moment. We face a global pandemic with less than a decade left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And science tells us that we must cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Last year, we saw more than 100 nations commit to net zero emissions by 2050, or in the case of China, before 2060. This momentum is significant. More than 70% of the world economy and 65% of global carbon dioxide emissions are now committed to net zero. But this is not enough. The Global Coalition for Net Zero emissions needs to grow to cover the entire G20 countries and more than 90% of the emissions. This is one of the central objectives of the Secretary General and the United Nations this year. At the same time, all commitments to net zero must be underpinned by credible plans with intermediate targets to achieving a just transition. The major emitters in the G20 must lead the way. If consistent with the Paris Agreement goals, their combined short-term actions will bend the temperature curve and open enormous windows of opportunity that we need to achieve the SDGs. This is a mighty task, and I know that India will do its fair share. India is currently the only G20 country that will overachieve the objectives of its nationally determined contributions. So much has been done already, as India is seeking greater energy security through a revolution in solar, wind, and energy storage, installing 450 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030 that will bring more jobs, cleaner air, and a more secure power grid. India's efforts provide a template and a path for others to follow, in particular through the international cooperation that this very institute represents. This year, more than ever, we count on India for its contribution to multilateralism as a force for good on COVID-19 vaccines, on climate action, on peacekeeping. Extreme weather and pathogens are transnational. Our solutions to this must also be transnational. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a severe setback to global progress on poverty eradication, food security, gender equality, and the other SDGs. But while we mourn the human tragedy of the pandemic, we must also seize the opportunities it offers. First among these is the chance to relaunch and to reshape the global economy. Now is the time to reinforce the environmental imperatives for sustainable economic growth. Now is the time to build a robust, resilient economy that is compatible with our climate goals. Every investment made in the recovery from COVID must be an investment in sustainability. The SDGs must be embedded in the national frameworks and institutions that go beyond specific political parties and administrations. We need to focus on areas that include gender equality and food systems and have the strongest catalytic effects in order to accelerate SDG implementation. Global policies and investments need to shift from grey to green. We must end fossil fuel subsidies and make societies, corporations, and communities more resilient to climate shocks. When we see some incremental steps towards sustainable business models, they're still very far from the scope of the scale that is required. We need national governments, regions, cities, businesses, and a civil society to work together towards a common goal of a more just, sustainable, and prosperous world. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, India has been an active, influential player on climate change from the very beginning. Even before the Paris Agreement, India was acting thoughtfully and strategically on its energy, environment, and development priorities. You have translated this strategic thinking into policies and into programs. Prime Minister Modi stood resolutely with the Paris Agreement, launching 2 major environmental initiatives in the time since: the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the International Solar Alliance. India is now poised to lead on the development of technologies that produce low-carbon steel and cement, and as co-leaders with Sweden of the Leadership Group for the Industry Transition. I look forward to seeing the path that you will chart to get to net zero emissions and a climate-resilient economy by mid-century. These efforts have not just national, but regional and global impact. I am confident that India can lead the way. India can count on the full support of the United Nations. Our expertise and convening power at the global and country level will hopefully maximize the impact of our partnership. I wish you productive deliberations and look forward to your ideas and to the leadership of those around the table today as we strive to meet the SDGs by 2030 and the Paris goals by 2050. I thank you.